great uncanceling of America and why it might finally be here. So for years, we've been fed a single grim narrative about American colleges, that these once vibrant marketplace of ideas have decayed into ideological echo chambers, which very well might be true. We're told a climate of fear has taken over, enforced by a student generation being more fragile than resilient. The story is that free speech is basically on life support in the United States, crushed by conformity and feelings over facts, and it's a powerful narrative of decline, intellectual cowardice, and of universities failing their most basic mission. What if the story might be taking a surprising, shocking turn of a cultural shift today? What if underneath those headlines something else is brewing, a quiet rebellion? What if the very generation we've been told is terrified of challenging the ideas, and for those students, starving for debates, starving for intellectual research? One professor at the University of Richmond, Terry L. Price, ran a high-risk experiment in his classroom, and the results might just be the signal of what is coming, leading to the great uncanceling of America. So Professor Price had an idea for a course he called Books You'll Never Read in College. Sounds controversial, right? For a course. He was concerned his students were increasingly unwillingness to engage with controversial social and political issues. And to test this theory, he asked the students to anonymously list topics they'd actively avoid discussing in class. Don't do it. Don't mention it. Don't talk about it. This is what's been going on at American universities. Can't even imagine the Ivy Leagues. But anyway, the list was a snapshot of divided public square, guns, religion, pronouns, abortion, socialism, race, policing, every hot button issue of our time. They were afraid of saying the wrong thing, being misunderstood, and of course of angering their peers and classmates. It's just human nature, is to not want to boil the pot, not want to get in the middle of a heated debate or argument. And with more and more stuff that we're seeing in the country today and the world's just increasingly more violent. People are more unwilling to reason, more unwilling to actually engage in debate, engage in conversation, sadly. So he did this to prove a point, this professor, but Professor Price didn't stop there. He leaned into the storm instead of running from it. He reframed the course with a proactive new title, You Can't Think That, interestingly enough, or can you? And built a syllabus designed to challenge, provoke open minds in college. It's kind of what you'd expect, at least in my opinion, of what college is all about. What happened next upends the narrative, or a sudden shift in the culture. The narrative, the coddle, intellectually timid students, which we've seen. We're not debating that this hasn't happened, but we're debating that it might be going towards a new shift as of recently. His experiment didn't just work. It revealed a deep hunger for the very thing we've been told has basically been squashed on college campuses: intellectual freedom and the thrill of real debate. But before we get into the classroom, we have to understand the world as it is. The idea of this campus speech crisis is rooted in some real and concerning data. Let's start there. So in 2024, a report from the Foundation of Individual Rights and Expression, or FIRE, painted a stark picture. It found that a huge number of professors admit to self-censoring. You heard me correctly, a professor self-censoring his or herself. 42% of the faculty said they are likely to self-censor their own classrooms. So take that for what you will. More than a third admitted to toning down their writings to avoid backlash. To put that in perspective, at the height of the McCarthy era, only 9% of social scientists said at the time that reports would suggest a real atmosphere of fear. One professor even told FIRE that they were scared to fill out the anonymous survey. This fear seems to hit conservative faculty the hardest. One survey found that nearly half of conservative professors felt they couldn't express their own opinions. It's pretty sad, especially on universities. Now, compared to just 19% of their more liberal swaying colleagues, this is what fuels the charge that universities were becoming progressive, progressive seminaries, really, funded by U.S. taxpayers. So if the professors are afraid to speak, what is the hope for the students? This is what's happening to the professors. The professors sworn to uphold honesty, integrity, and vigorous debate and actually educate students. Well, here's where the story gets more complicated because when you shift the focus to the students, a different picture has been emerging. That narrative of widespread chilling effect doesn't seem to hold up, but it's starting to chip the ice. In fact, in recently, large scale studies from 2025 directly from challenge the idea of these campuses. Are we witnessing a campus culture shift at the moment? A major study from the Lumina Foundation and Gallup found that about three-quarters of students think their college does an excellent or at least average good job of promoting free speech. And this holds true across more of the political aisle. 73% of Republicans and 75% of Democrats and independents gave their school high marks. But those are still up to debate, especially after the things we've been seeing over the past number of years. So on top of that, most students say they feel respected and able to express themselves. The same Gallup polls show only 74% of students feel respected by peers, and 82% feel respected by their professors. When asked if they personally feel free to share their opinions, the numbers are still pretty high. 78% of Democrats, 73% of independents, and 69% of Republicans agree they can speak freely. What's been on display over the past number of years is just completely different from the numbers. So what's going on? How can professors be self-censoring at record rates while most students feel free to speak their mind, as students should, as anyone should in this great country? It suggests that a fascinating disconnect, perhaps the perception of a crisis. Again, the media loves to get in on that. The media never not chases a good story, amplified by media and politics, is stronger than the daily reality for a lot of the students. Can't ignore that bias does exist, just that wouldn't be comfortable. Of course it does. It could be that while students feel they can personally speak, they believe that the campus environment is hostile to their idea, whether it's liberal or conservative. They could feel that way, especially conservative ones. The Gallup poll did find students were more likely to believe liberal views could be shared more freely than conservative views. This is what we're talking about here. So this complex world is one Professor Terry L. Price stepped into, a world where faculty feel a chill, but the students report a much more opening climate for them than we think. He launched this experiment right into the gap between the fear and the quiet courage. So this professor, he's a professor of leadership studies, saw firsthand that his bright, curious students were becoming masters of avoiding the big, messy questions. After years of this occurring on campus, students would be an expert at this by now. His answer was the course. You can't think that, or can you? Great title. The description was a call to arms. It stated the class would experiment with conventional ideas and that everyone would voluntarily assume the risk of being, quote unquote, offended. This wasn't about creating a safe space from ideas. It was about creating a safe space for free speech, a place to practice intellectual courage, what I feel a university should always be striving for. The syllabus was an intellectual obstacle course, as it was stated. It started with foundational texts on free expression, Plato's Apology, John Stuart Mill's On Liberty. These were training manuals for the mind, teaching why the freedom to question and even being wrong is essential. But the course quickly dove into modern battles. Students read a gauntlet of today's most controversial thinkers: Thomas Sowell on social justice, Heather McDonald on policing, Abigail Shearer on gender identity, and Bradford Wilcox on traditional marriage. These books weren't chosen to push an ideology. They were chosen because on many campuses they are intellectually equivalent of radioactive material or radioactive liquid. By putting them in front and center, Price was making a statement. No idea is too dangerous to discuss openly and thoughtfully. Great idea. So the main goal stated in the syllabus was to help students hold our political commitments and identities loosely. In today's world, that's just a revolutionary idea.